Hi, this is Paul. I want to spend some time with the movie Jesus Revolution. Now, I didn't see it when it came out in theaters, but it is out on Netflix and it is out on DVD and Blu-ray, so there are lots of ways to see it. Just people want to know just the general. I enjoyed the movie. I enjoyed watching it immensely. I found some passages of it extremely moving and powerful. I thought the movie had a level of honesty about it, which was refreshing for a lot of Christian, let's say Christian propaganda movies that are trying to sway people to maybe consider becoming Christians. One overall interesting take, the way the movie ended. Is the movie about becoming a Christian, or is the movie about falling in love? I thought the movie was very well made. The movie was well acted, well directed, well paced, and but at the end, I kind of wonder, and it was packaged for a popular audience, and so I can completely see why the movie was a box office success, and people enjoyed it. People enjoyed seeing it and found it moving. Now, those are my overall impressions, but I've got a lot more thoughts about the portrayal of the movie, and really my interest is in what the movie says about our, at least one current cultural version of Christianity called evangelicalism, and a whole bunch of things connected with it, because there's a lot of complex things in the story itself and in the movie. Now, it's very interesting that the first slide in the movie says based on a true revolution, and I think that's right. Obviously, especially the character of Lonnie Frisbee, there's a lot of debate around him, and Connie, his ex-wife, has said some things about the movie. There are a lot of articles that came out about the movie. And always in a modernist society, we have this question of, well, is it historical? And right now, with the recession in modernity, that whole understanding of what historical is very much up for grabs, because you have just recently on The Rest is History, I was listening to their episode on Viking sorcery, which was just a fascinating episode. And what's really happening at the end of at the passing of modernity is really a question between one and the other three P's. When in modernity you ask, is it historical? They're asking sort of a correspondence propositional question. Does it feel like the history? Well, there's the rest of the three P's, participatory, and it's sort of, does this feel true to the feeling of the thing? And now movies have always been really powerful in the participatory and in the perspectival, because movies, you very quickly psychologically identify with a character and you undergo sort of the hero's journey of the character. And this is in a sense a hero's journey story about Greg Lowry. Now, Greg Lowry will become a successful pastor and then an evangelist who would go around holding big campaigns, sort of in the Billy Graham style. I remember, I think it was here, even at Living Stones, Greg Lowry was still sort of doing the evangelist circuit. So this movie is very much sort of a product of this. Now, what's interesting is that some might say, okay, boomer to the whole movie, because the movie is very much situated in the boomer context, as is this wave of evangelicalism that has continued to develop. Now, some friends of mine who come to Living Stones the week I was gone decided to go up to Bethel and Reading and reported to me on Sunday about their experience there, which was totally fun listening to them. I've never had a chance to go up to Bethel and Reading. I've seen plenty of big box evangelical, big sound production. I've seen plenty of charismatic type ministries before. Of course, Bethel is sort of at the top of the heap of that right now, and we've also had some people in the corner who were raised and grew up with Bethel, and I've had some interesting conversations with them. They've come down to the meetup because Bethel is up in Reading, only 2 hours north of Sacramento. So, but this, some of what would sort of cause a little bit of disagreement between, let's say, Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee was the Catherine Kuhlman Pentecostalism question. There's some friction in there. Ken Smith would be pretty much a straight down, the founder of Calvary Chapel, who's portrayed by Kelsey Graham here. You know, pretty much straight down the middle, big box evangelical minister. You can even see that in some of the opening things about what baptism is. That'll raise some hackles of sacramentalists when we come to that. But so there's a lot going on here. And I think it's worthwhile to sort of pay attention. And so even based on a true revolution is already more three Ps. It's participatory, it's perspectival, it's procedural. And so that way we're already sort of receding from the propositional even by just simply this slide. Now, I can't obviously play the movie and do commentary on it like I can on a Jordan Peterson thing because the movie is out recently. And there very much is sort of a time thing. You never quite know where YouTube will somehow come down on come down with copyright strikes on something. So I learned with the Mrs. Davis thing not to let any video run because, especially on something very recent, YouTube is very clear at it. But I'll just stop on certain frames here and there that highlight some of what's going on in the movie. So the movie opens, needless to say, there's plenty of spoilers involved. So if you don't want anything spoiled, you better shut it off now. So the movie opens with sort of this airy feels baptism scene, and people, of course, are dressed up in 60s garb. Now, even that culturally is interesting because the counterculture and the hippie movement, it still has an air of credibility and respectability and nostalgia in American culture. Just don't look too closely at what really happened in a lot of that. And of course, Byrne Power, who lived a bunch of this stuff, you can talk to him about it because, he was there, he lived it. I was a little bit young. I was on the other coast, but Northside Chapel, my father's ministry, was very much a countercultural church because young Christian Reformed people wanted to be part of the racial reconciliation movement, and so for them, worshiping in a black church, serving the African American community, that was a big deal. That isn't focused in here. Now, there's a Time reporter who's sort of dotted throughout the movie, and he's African American. There's little points given sort of to the racial question, but for the most part, it's leaning onto 1960s ascendant culture radicalism and nostalgia. So really the protagonist in this story, the hero in this story, is Greg Lowry. There are a lot of other characters, but Greg Lowry is portrayed by this young actor, and in many ways it's really his story that this is about and his transformation. And so in many ways he's sort of the character to watch when you watch this, just like the America Ferrera character is sort of the character to watch in the Barbie movie. So some people say this is the end of the era. So here's the reporter talking to the Chuck Smith Kelsey Grammer character at this baptism. Again, it's good. The music is swelling. It's got all the feels. There are others who say it's the beginning of something new. Now, this first line that he says in the movie is really interesting because it's not something to explain. It's something to experience. And so, again, we're moving away from the propositional and we're moving into the other three Ps. Now, one of the things that I've wanted to make a movie about, what I've been thinking about a lot of lately, is the question of re-enchantment. That's a focus of Rod Dreer's upcoming book. That's a focus of Hunting Magic Eels, Richard Beck's book. It's touched on in Justin Breyer. Did I bring Justin's new book here? So this is Justin Brierley's new book. This is an advanced copy of it, and I'm going to be talking to Justin in a couple weeks about his book. I got a chance to see an early draft very early when I was in the UK. He sent one to me. A lot of people in this corner will very much recognize it. I think Justin has a better seat than just about anybody else to sort of get a view of what's happening around at least in the English speaking developed world with respect to the church. And so we're gonna talk a lot about that as especially as Justin and I get into the conversation. But I think almost every Christian revolution, almost every awakening has been fundamentally about re-enchantment. And you can hear that in the Kelsey Grammer quote that sort of leads off the movie. And it tells you how the movie is supposed to be received and portrayed. It's about an experience. And of course, you're starting out with this baptism, this beautiful California beach. This is the experience and have the experience. But it would be easy to sort of dismiss it as merely experience, but throughout the movie, they're going to wrestle with that question of experience and permanence. You can have an enchanted moment, but will the enchantment stay? That will become a crucial question for the Greg Lowry character as he goes through the movie. So that's an important theme. So even though it sort of starts out and it would be easy to sort of dismiss it as an experience, it shouldn't be dismissed because the movie is actually more serious than that. What you're seeing is a symbol of new life. Makes me think of Peter Kreeft's book where he compares I forget who he had for the Roman Catholic, maybe Ratzinger, I don't remember, a Roman Catholic, and then C.S. Lewis, and then Billy Graham in terms of sacraments. And so there are a few moments where there's sacraments, there's Lord's Supper, and there's baptism in this movie. And yeah, it's evangelical, and symbol is kind of light. So, you know, the neo-sacramentalism, that's those tensions are there. And of course, here is the dream, the vision, every regret, every doubt, all washed away. New life in baptism, but not just symbolically. And see, there's the tension, you know, it fully, really. And of course, we just have, because this is really sort of in the middle of the movie when Greg Lowry goes in for baptism. So here's the character, the Jesus guy playing Lonnie Frisbee. Okay, another theme. So the reporter comes up to the Greg Lowry and says, people are calling this God's Forever Family. And now for Lowry, this is going to be a key thing. And we're going to see that in a few minutes because we're going to go to his character and take a look at what his family life is about. Now, what's key here, and the way in which this is a boomer film, is that you should read George Marsden's The Twilight of the American Enlightenment, where he deals with this period of time. Because in the post-World War II period, on one hand, America was, you know, this hegemonic force overlooking the world. It was the undestroyed continent. It was the superpower. It had the nuclear weapon. It had prosperity. While Europe and Asia were having to rebuild off after the war, America was just booming. Soldiers were coming back. The Great Depression was over. It was the time when there was prosperity, when there was social order, when Christianity and church attendance reaches its peak in America. Now, that is important because when you sort of look at the counterculture, and then you look at this, which would be the creation of a Christian version of the counterculture, or the Christian response to the counterculture, it's really important to not forget the setup. And, you know, I've spoken about this before. A great book to read on this is Chuck Colson's Born Again. And I always sort of paraphrase this great moment in the book because Chuck Colson, of course, he was Nixon's hatchet man and he was completely loyal to Richard Nixon, and now he was in trouble with the law and he was going to go to jail, and he meets some, you know, very sincere, very enchanted Christians on Capitol Hill, and he comes home to tell his wife, honey, I've become a Christian. And she, of course, this isn't the quote, but this is the sense of it, I thought we were Episcopalian. And so this is very much sort of this re-enchantment of it. And so what Greg Lowry is looking for, so the movie very much has a deeply psychological aspect to it, of course. He is looking for family. And in a minute, we'll see why he's looking for family, because for all of what the all of what 1950s Ozzie and Harriet, Leave It to Beaver America tried to portray it as the dream, many didn't participate in the dream. Now, generally speaking, that's often presented as sort of the intro to, let's say, ethnic minorities and gay people and so on and so forth. That's sort of become the standard trope about how to deal with this. But we shouldn't forget that this participating in shalom, in peace, in what people dream about. Scott Adams just did a thing on marriage again. Maybe I should just play a little bit in here.
Larry Elder's take, that the family unit and keeping the father there is important.
And so he mentions Larry Elders. Now, Larry Elders is obviously African American. One of the issues about the sort of the setup for the counterculture is that in many ways, and of course Thomas Sowell will point on this, despite the obvious evils of Jim Crow and the obvious evils of racial discrimination throughout the rest of the United States before the Civil Rights Movement, despite all of that, this is how multifaceted reality is. African American families were in better shape before the counterculture. African Americans were they were going to church, and in fact the civil rights movement leverages the integrity of African American families and conservatism that still is within the African American population. That's one of the things that always blows me away, because when you look at TV, you think that African Americans are like the far extreme of liberalism in America, but I've spent my entire life living in African American communities, and many of them are deeply conservative people. And so to have Larry Elder come out and do what he does doesn't surprise me. So Scott Adams, who's again sort of an IDW type in that he is in one way very much a lefty who over the last 5 to 8 years has sort of swung the other way, and Jordan Peterson-esque, Brett Weinstein-esque. We still don't have a name. IDW really doesn't fit. We still don't have a name for these they're not really neoconservatives, because that one's been used, but that's Jordan Peterson, Scott Adams, myself included in many ways, someone who was traditionally much more left-wing and now sort of, except I don't know if I really qualify because I've always been Christian Reformed, and so the progressive that I was never terribly progressive, probably only moderate. And so in that way, sort of similar to Jordan Peterson.
I would agree with everything he says about that, but I would argue that maybe things have changed, and not just in how we financially reward people for not having a father. But I think we're in a situation where I don't think we can go back. So it's not that having a family unit...
And it's so interesting. We're in a situation we can't go back. We'll go back to what? Go back to 1950s, which is really sort of 45 to 65, that 20 years, that generation.
Doesn't produce better results, it seems to very clearly. But if you can't go back to it, in other words, if we're on a one-way journey and you just can't go back, because...
In other words, well, we're just going to tell us in a minute why we can't go back.
For whatever reason, and I don't think it's just financial. Well, I'm just going to say it. All right, I didn't want to say it, but I'm just going to say it. The reason people don't stay married is that we suck. That's it.
He's Calvinist. He's Augustinian. Shebang.
That's it. People suck. We're not people that you should marry and stay married to. We're just not. Not the men, not the women.
Now, this is an important thing to think about with the Jesus Revolution movie, because the movie is about personal transformation, and this theme in sort of the wisdom space for men, at least our more section of the manosphere that's still positive on marriage, is transformation is required. And so behind the Jesus Revolution movie is the question of transformation.
The men are not worth staying with, and the women are not worth staying with. They're just not worth it. Now, I'm not talking about any individual, and I'm not talking about my life because I'm a rich guy. Nothing applies. You know, my rich guy getting married and divorced is not like yours.
Yeah, rich people can afford divorce, but one of the interesting things about marriage now is that rich people actually divorce less than poor people because rich people like to keep their money. And so, yeah, I should really screenshot this picture. Always got to be thinking about the thumbnails.
Right? You all know that. I can afford to get married. I can afford to get divorced. So it's different. It's different. But if a divorce is the difference between poverty and making it, you know, that's a whole different world. And in that world,
And what's interesting here is because divorce still is the difference between poverty and making it for a certain level of society, but people still divorce. I've been, gosh, I'm so ADHD. How can you possibly watch these videos? So those of you who are in the membership thing know that my daughter, I've always run sort of a fleet for my kids. I own all the cars. I'm like a Milltown owner in New England. I own all the cars. The kids buy them. They pay for them from me. They pay after they graduate from college. They pay me for the car they're driving, which by that point is well depreciated after my wife and I have driven it for a while. But it's been well maintained, and I trust it because I know the car. And so that way, when they get out of college, they've got a car that they can start with, and I don't charge them interest, and I give them a good deal. They just have to make their monthly payments to me on the car, and I use those monthly payments to finance the new car, which will eventually get carried down, et cetera, et cetera. And until at some point the kids get old enough and independent enough that they buy their own car and I'm not on it and they got to insure it themselves and all that. But for now, I buy the car, they pay me, they pay the insurance, and everything works. Well, my daughter, I had gotten a 2001 PT Cruiser from a friend of mine who used to work in retirement homes. Someone was like, I came here for a Jesus Revolution commentary, and now I'm hearing about this dude and his family and his cars and his 2001 PT Cruiser. Anyway, so a purple PT Cruiser from 2001 I picked up from a friend for $1,500. It only had 67,000 miles on because the guy worked in a nursing home, or not a nursing home, but a retirement home, and he bought it from a guy who bought it new, and his record of repairs was this fat, and he always got it repaired. Everything always done at the dealership. So the car ran just fine. 2001, 67,000 miles on. And then, one of my daughters graduated from college, needed the car. And I had all of these cars. And, well, you can pick what you want. She says, I want the purple PT Cruiser. Okay, had a standard transmission, so I always like having one in the family so the kids would learn how to drive stick shifts. So if they go on the Amazing Race, they don't look like total idiots. And so she drove that car for a couple of years. But she's now no longer living in Sacramento, and now she has to do some decent driving around. And when we had one of our nice Central Valley 108-degree temperature days, the car overheated going up some hills. And I thought, I kept telling her, I said, honey, you're driving that car more now. You're going to have to think about getting a real car. But since the pandemic, the used car market has been, it used to be that you should at this point be able to find a 3-year-old car that's in good repair and has a lot of life in it, and you should maybe get it for just under $20,000, maybe $17,000, $18,000, and off you go. But because of the pandemic, the used car market's totally messed up, which has inflated prices, and now with higher interest rates anyway, yada, yada, yada. So my daughter needed a car, and my wife and I had both bought cars just at the beginning of the pandemic, which was the perfect time to buy because dealers were fat with inventory. I mean, nobody was buying cars, and interest rates were like nothing. So my wife and I both bought cars then. So then, and we have a big car for when we drive around with all of us, and we have a little car for me to just run around and do something economical. And so I looked at my daughter's situation, and I thought she needs a car. I have a 3-year-old used car. I had 0% interest on it. So, okay, honey, you can assume payments and then pay me the difference. but that means that I'm in the market for a new car at a terrible time to buy a car. But I'm interested in electric cars because I want something to stop paying. If you live in California and you realize what we pay for gas here because of our gas taxes and our cap and trade and all of that stuff, yeah, you'd be thinking about electric car too. Plus the fact that here in California we have all this sunshine. I don't think electric cars are going to finally replace internal combustion engines. I think we're going to continue to see. But anyway, electric cars go pretty good in California because the weather is good, and we've got now solar panels all over the place, and so electricity is plentiful. Yada yada yada. So I'm looking around for an electric car, but I'm still a cheapskate, and I'm not opposed to paying for quality, but I'm not going to pay crazy interest rates, yada yada yada. So I'm listening to these guys, and I'm just getting a lesson in the car market about how 85% of customers are payment customers, and how what's going on now is that people are taking just these, well, it's just insane.
At origination means $9,000 of the loan is unsecured.
And so people they're upside down in their previous car, and they take it in and they trade it in, and then the average used car interest rate for people now is 13.76%. It's like, you got to be out of your mind. 14% on a car loan? I mean, this isn't the 1970s. Anyway, my point is, so much of the population is just nickel and diming their way through life, and things aren't getting any easier for them. And that's the reality. And then later on, you've got, some dude weighs in and basically says, I'm driving a 99 Wrangler, and I have a 87 Wrangler, and then a 76 Buick, and that's his thing. So, people are just trying to figure things out. Back to marriage. It's tough out there, and many people don't and can't. They don't have the executive functioning, or they haven't had the formation, or for whatever reason, they're just trying to get by day to day, month to month, and so they buy a car. Oh, it's only costing me $300 a month. Yeah, but you have a 10-year. I mean, car loans are going out 10 years. You have a 10-year car loan at 13% interest, and that's why your payment's $300 a month. And it's like, people go into marriage like that, and so yeah, it's a mess. Anyway, back to our friend Scott.
The benefit of getting married just isn't there because people suck. I do believe that people are worse people than they've ever been.
That's an amazing comment. Now, I don't look to Scott Adams for accuracy for much, and I really don't think that's true at all. And I think he could stand a good dose of Tom Holland, and the rest is history. But the point he's making is, I think, similar to the point that Guy Sengstock has been making. And that was on this video that I messed up the sound on, that's also in the membership channel, because it's like, here's first 18 minutes of this video has sound and the rest is a mess. So you can find it in the membership channel. I kind of like the thumbnail, but I should just play the clip.
The Gen Xers, or not Xers, is it Z?
Now I played this for a previous video, but this is one of these clips that is worth playing over and over and over again, because it tells you a lot of sort of where Scott Adams is coming from, and it gets into the whole Jesus Revolution question of understanding that revolution with respect to its time.
Showing my age. Who don't have a memory before synchronistic communication, right, was optional, right? They don't even have a memory for that. Therefore, they don't even have it as, it's almost like relationship on some level occurs as this unnecessary thing, right? That I just happened to go on YouTube, and I saw a thing where it was a streamer, the guy who just streamed, just playing games and talks on YouTube all day, talked about his sex life, And he's like, why would I actually go out and have a real sex? That would mean I have to go out of my apartment and I'd have to go down and talk to people and go to the bar and then maybe meet somebody.
Now this is sort of where Scott Adams and Bill Maher's lifestyle comes into place because these are rich guys. They can get sex. They can get sex with hot women. They might have to pay for it. And they could pay for it in different ways. Maybe they pay for it with an escort, or maybe they pay for it just because there are a lot of young women who are rather naive out there and they get starstruck and they think they can be a groupie. And so, yeah, if you're a high status male, one way or another, you can get sex with desirable women. But having sex with a desirable woman is not being able to maintain a successful relationship with a desirable woman.
And bring them back, and then I have to take my clothes off, and it's like I could just go to this Discord server, and I've already broken my computer persona sex, right? I'm
Your computer cherry?
de-virginized there already. Why would I do all of that? So I think, and then if you also think about it, where we're also in a time where all you need is an internet connection, right? A computer. And like you could literally have a ton of connections, know millions of people, start a company, become world famous, become a billionaire. And you could do it without ever having to have an actual interaction. We're in a time where that's possible. So whenever you uncouple anything from anything else, the same thing happened with the Industrial Revolution, where it uncoupled, like machines brought the world right in front of us. So it uncoupled functioning from movement. Boom, you uncouple those things. And then we have this that transformed our relationship to our body. I think
we have this deeply transactional, momentary, experiential capacity and relationship. And so a relationship with someone over OnlyFans or an escort or what is that Barbie term? Long-term, distant, low-commitment, casual girlfriend or sex partner.
something at a basic level like that is happening with relationship. Now, when you do that with this, when you consider what these awkward things called relationships are, they're how we become people. We become people through them.
They're how we become good people. Well, what do I mean by good people? People with the capacity of exactly what Scott Adams is saying. People are losing the capacity for this because all that awkward stuff is hard.
And they're inherently messy. They're inherently uncomfortable. If you think about all the possible things that could happen by you and I just engaging in a conversation, you could say something to me that I misunderstood that could hurt me so bad that I need therapy for 10 years, right? Or you could say something to me that could enlighten me, right? There's this range of possibilities that could happen in any interaction. And so that's inherently scary. So if you make it optional, right, our nervous systems are just going to do the easier thing, right?
And that's exactly where Scott Adams is. And because Scott Adams is rich, he can afford to.
And I think we see that all over the place. So I don't think that's the whole reason, right? Why dialectic and the dialogos and everything that we're doing here. I don't think it's the whole reason, but I think it's a big reason why it's speaking to us, right?
Just in general. People are worse than they've ever been to each other in terms of what it would take to be a partner for marriage. And I feel like we can't say that out loud. Because, somebody's going to turn it racist, of course. Somebody's going to turn it into sexism, of course. But you didn't hear me say that, right? I didn't say it's, limited to just one group, because it's not. I didn't say it's, one gender is the bad one, because they're not. We've just become terrible people. So how do you fix that? So I think the Larry Elder solution of strength.
Now he asks, how do you fix that? And he leaves it hanging because he basically says there's no answer to it. There's no realistic answer to it. Again, the video that I made that had the sound messed up, it started with this Hillary Clinton piece in The Atlantic, the weaponization of loneliness. In many ways, that's what we're talking about. And Hillary Clinton just makes it about a political battle that, well, if you elect Democrats, then we won't have this problem. It's like this is just crazy. And I'd almost want to say, I don't know Hillary's life, but hey, she's managed to stay married to Bill. What's that like? None of us have any idea. I still look at it and think, I don't think that I'd want to be in that marriage. David Brooks' piece was very much better. He engaged at least some of the issues, but I think the issues have far more to do with a lot of the stuff that Guy Senstock is talking about, that we just can now afford to be jerks. And a big part of that is because of the internet, because the internet is sort of has a filter on it that if you say something I don't like, I will just stop listening to you. And in real life, you can't do that with real people, the people that you share your home with. Now, these tensions have always been there, but what to do about it? All right, let's get back to the movie. So young Greg Lowry is looking for family because, well, we're going to see in a minute why. I don't really know what a family feels like. Again, it's the 3 Ps, not the propositional. It's the participatory. It's the perspectival. It's the procedural. Not only doesn't he know what a family looks like, he doesn't even know how to be in a family. And so to a degree, he again is the central character of this movie. He's going to have the hero's journey. He's going to have the coming of age. And so is it a love story? Because really what he's going to have to figure out how to do is, because he's got real daddy issues, which you figure out as this movie goes on, that his mother's been lying to him about who his father is and about how the breakup of the family that has left her on a beautiful trailer and on a Malibu oceanfront thing, as if, we watch that today and we think, boy, in the 1960s, could you just have a crappy trailer like Rockford Files or Greg Lowry's mom and look over the Pacific coast? Yes, you could. Can't do that in Malibu today. Take my word for it. How'd you end up here? Okay, that's going to set up then the story. 1 year earlier. So it starts off with him ironing his military school shirt, and a lot of great little details in this, because going from military school to anti-war protest is just sort of the quintessential turn. And again, the 1960s were far more buttoned down and regular. The counterculture sort of came onto America slowly and really didn't hit a lot of America until the 70s and even the late 70s. And by that point, you just got the hangover and not the buzz. So then he's super interested in what's going on in Haight-Ashbury. And again, I've covered this in some previous videos. There's a lot of good stuff written about it. If you want a nice history of it, you can look at Larry Eskridge's God's Forever Family. It really goes through a lot of a good history of it and hits on the biblicism, the counterculture, the reaction to the mess that it was. So this is, these are the people running the church when some of the hippies kind of came in the Bay Area. And again, before Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco was a blue-collar, working-class town. I mean, just visit the Alcatraz Museum and you get a sense of what the place was like. So these kids call themselves hippies. They represent a new rebellion against the status quo. Well, what are they rebelling against? Are they rebelling that in some ways post-war affluence worked? Well, yeah, they had, unlike people in the Depression, they had the affluence. They were living in an affluent enough society that they could check out, and they could do that. On the other hand, they also saw, as we're going to see in the Greg Lowry character, they also saw that in other ways it didn't work. And in that way, it's similar to Scott Adams, in that Scott Adams was tried, married twice. It says, doesn't work. It's just easier for me to be transactional about my relationships Bill Maher, same thing. In terms of having friends, then transactional about my sex. Here are people I like having sex with because they're beautiful, because they're available, and because they don't ask too much of me. So great little thing. He's watching this TV, ironing his military shirt and hearing about the hippies. He's kind of turned on. And you hear this coughing in the background and the overflow. This is very well made. And the so-called materialism of his parents. So he's living on this trailer by a Southern California beach. That should be like the dream of every, 17-year-old guy. But the coughing is coming from his mom, who's laying there passed out on the couch because she's on her bed because she's an alcoholic. And this is just so Mad Men, because the mom's got her hair in exactly that way, and she's a good-looking woman, but her looks are starting to, she's getting to that point now where, it's not the bloom of youth anymore, and you see she's got all, the supports available to her time and space to try and keep the attractiveness, and she's falling asleep with a cigarette in bed. I mean, the guys who set this thing up, and she's calling him, Gregory, come help me. Turn on, tune in, and drop out. And there's going to be a great scene with a psychedelic. And that's part of the reason why, you start talking psychedelics with Burn Power, he's going to give it to you because he's going to say, yeah, I was there. We thought LSD would save the world. You know what? It doesn't. And now I've just initiated a whole bunch of comments on my YouTube channel. So here's this nice picture when he's, little prepubescent Greg and his mom by a beach, and you're just getting hints that, well, there's no dad here. What happened? Oh, shoot. So yeah, I mean, this kid should be living the dream. Look where he's living. I mean, today you'd pay big bucks to have a trailer there right off the shore. Oops, got to go back so mom doesn't burn the trailer down. And the voiceover in the back on the news, our fathers are at work and can't relate to the family. Again, read George Marston's The Twilight of the American Enlightenment. This was sort of the stereotype in the 1950s of the plastic corporate man. Now today, of course, many people give their eye teeth for the kind of corporate security and benefits that were available in the 50s and 60s. But our fathers are at work, but Greg Lowry has no father. Okay, the hippies present a social dilemma. The clothes they wear, the way they preach love and oppose hate. So now we cut over to Chuck Smith watching TV, and young Greg Lowry is just entranced by this, and Chuck Smith and his wife, middle-aged pastor couple in an unsuccessful dying church, are horrified by what they see on TV. So you've got Chuck Smith and his wife and his teenage daughter in the back. And of course, you can see how this thing gets set up, because we're going to have sort of this classic, and now this has been instantiated in films, the generation gap. Now the youth is going to be rebelling, and she's going to be with it and hip, and she's going to be about love, and they're going to be about order, etc., etc. Daughter says to them, you stare at that thing like the world is ending. And they're like, it is. And in some ways, they're right. A world is ending and another one is beginning. And of course, hip daughter says, I think what they're doing is kind of beautiful. This becomes a thing. The parents are watching TV. Their whole image of the world, their whole monarchical vision is coming through the television set, through the God set to them. And, honey, are you doing drugs? And the daughter's like, oh, gosh. No, I'm not doing drugs, Mom. Today it would be, honey, were you born in the wrong body? Now, the daughter lands something here. She says, they want peace and love. Church minister, dad and mom, isn't that what you want, peace and love? Yeah. I think these kids need help. Now, that's going to be true. The parents have a point, too. Now, of course, the parents are judgmental. You're passing judgment. The great sin of the counterculture is judgmentalism. So then dad he says, I'm called square. Well, when God brings in a hippie in here, I'll ask him what it's all about. Now, the daughter's going to take him up on that challenge. I mean, again, Propositional history, now very skeptical. It's way too convenient, way too packaged, of course, but again, we're giving a mood, we're giving a vibe, we're giving the participatory, the procedural, the perspectival. That's what we're giving here. That's what movies are really good at communicating. And then the daughter lands another blow. I do not understand, he says. Well, maybe that's why your church is so empty. Dum, dum, dum. Spoken by Pastor Paul, whose church is so empty. Now, again, this is a movie about Jesus, or is this a movie about finding a girl? So our young hero, Greg Lowry, is going to meet Kathy. Now, spoiler alert, he's going to marry Kathy. And a big part of this movie is about, and this is, again, part of why to have a movie without a youthful romantic interest, it doesn't really go well. But this has that, and I think people will enjoy it for that. So there's going to be a concert, and he gets invited. The Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin. It's going to be great. So now we have the prophets of the era. So now we see dying pastor church with old square people, and the only youthful person there is the daughter of the pastor who has to be there, and she's bored out of her gourd, and they're talking about witnessing, yada, yada, yada. I mean, again, all of these things have been tropes in evangelicalism now since the counterculture. This became the basic narrative that basically set up the seeker movement, Bill Hybels, Rick Warren. I mean, evangelicalism has been running this script for 50 years since the counterculture, because this true revolution changed evangelicalism, and we'll see that in a little bit. And so, he's preaching about kids these days don't have restraints, and kids these days, and this is the kind of preaching I always hate, because it's, everybody out there's bad, and it's just in here us little selective good who, we're just hunkered down until, like Essenes in the desert. We're going to take our holy books and we're going to put them in jars and we're going to stuff them in caves. Now, young pastor daughter might not be doing drugs, but she's into the music and she's singing along as she's driving down the road. And she's going to pick up Lonnie Frisbee and she's going to take him home. And so now, hey, Dad, here's a real hippie. Put up or shut up. And, well, Lonnie Frisbee's going to be like Jesus walking into the movie. Now our young military kid is going to drop out of military school, and he's going to go to public school so he can go to school with the blonde, and he goes to the rock concert, and everything seems great. So now Lonnie Frisbee says, hey, you got us hippies all wrong. There's a lot of kids out there trying this stuff, but they're looking for God, and they're looking in all the wrong places. And, man, you, the pastor, you have the answer, but your doors are shut to us. Why don't you open up the door and let Jesus in? So our young hero is out there, newfound love with Kathy, with an E, not a Y, and meanwhile, Lonnie Frisbee is preaching to Chuck Smith, saying, "Hey, man," and he's now, but this is deadly for a pastor. It's like, hey, where's your love for people? That's all set in your DNA. You just have to live it, buddy. Now we're going to get to the LSD part. Now we're going to have to expand our consciousness. And it goes back and forth. Man, we thought acid was going to save the world. Some people still think that. But that was a lie. Well, this is something the preacher's, he's got his attention. As much as a lie is what we're rebelling against. In other words, acid won't save the world. Neither will American affluence and prosperity. My people are a desperate bunch. And Pastor, you have the answer. So open up the door. And of course, Pastor's moved. He got into this work because he loves people. That's what the gospel's about. It's about loving people. What would it take for you, Chuck Smith, to be desperate? Oh, I don't know. Maybe having a dying church, that might do it. Then you have Timothy Leary type character. The psychedelic experience is a confrontation with the divine. It's a spiritual awakening. You come back and you define God now after your mind has been blown. So turn on, tune in, and drop out. And of course, this movie, I mean, it's tight. They've got the narrative down. Now remember, Greg Lowry is an evangelist, so probably he has preached this sermon again and again and again and again without the visual illustrations. Start a new sequence of behavior. It's procedural. And now we have, this movement. But of course, Lonnie Frisbee's already set it up to say, no, this movement doesn't pan out. Be reborn. And then an airplane comes over and drops little packets of LSD, and they all get high. And it's that they've found what they've been looking for. You'll see a bunch of kids who are looking for all the right things in all the wrong places. So now flashbacks start coming back of little Greg and this mess that American affluence hasn't produced. And his mom loves him. His mom wants a good life. What's his mom going to do? And little Greg, when is dad coming home? Dad's not coming home. A little later he learns that, no, dad didn't leave them. Mom left dad and took him with them. And again, this is it's not just the money. It's that what Scott Adams is pointing to. It's people's incapacity to love one another as they should. And again, every night he has to, sit there while mom drinks herself to sleep after looking for a new man, etc., etc. This is family. Now we see Kathy's family, and Kathy's parents are squares too, and so you have the generation divide. And Kathy, are you doing drugs? And of course, Greg's going to walk into that, and they're going to be very suspicious of him. But Kathy's parents are not religious. So you have the Chuck Smith character, the pastor, then you have Kathy's parents who are not religious. They're just part of the American prosperity. And again, the movie just nails the sets and the clothes, and it just really nails the life of the 1960s. So now you have the vision of the counterculture. We see what's really going on in the world. Dad says, I see a young lady who's going to end up in an alley with a needle in her arm. So you have the drug panic, and Dad's just trying to save you from where it's going. And of course, in all fairness to Dad, a lot of people ended up there, but not everyone. But again, they're all sort of trying to view the world and figure out the world through the television, through the news, through the mass media, through what's going on. So now Greg Lowry ditches the military outfit and gets a hip, cool vest with some fringes and now joins public school. There you go, Sacramentalists. This cup represents my blood. And you think, what happened to that biblicism? This is my body broken for you. Where did that biblicism go when it starts countering? I always mention when my mother-in-law was a Baptist and she'd pencil in corrections in the King James Bible, and I said, you're not supposed to do this, right? I mean, now, in the book, let's get back to the cover, God's Forever Family, some real good passages about what happened when the hippies start coming into church, and they don't behave in church like everyone expects them to behave, and you have all that tension, and the movie portrays that very well. Yes, for my sins, and of course, and then there's going to be a showdown in the church over the new people and the old people. Again, this has become such evangelical boilerplate at this point. I mean, that's why this revolution is so important, because it really did remake the church. And this is how churches get remade, by these revolutions over time. Of course, his wife, he's not wearing any shoes. That's okay, honey. We'll get him some shoes later. There's a church planter in our area who likes preaching without shoes, and I remember hearing about that. And you can look at Moses and the burning bush, or you can think about the counterculture, and it's funny the way this stuff continues to roil through the church. But of course, now you've got sort of the whole setup of the squares versus the hip, cool people, and the squares are judgmental and hypocritical, and the hip cool people are authentic. And again, this isn't just in church, this is the whole counterculture thing. And of course, you're going to have the showdown with the pastor, but the pastor's a good pastor, and people give him an ultimatum, and the pastor's like, do I have to choose between my congregation and Jesus? I choose Jesus. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gotten into this business. Now, back to our young hero, Greg Lowry. He's gotten into the drug scene, and he's hanging out with the hippies, and he's doing the whole thing. But don't forget, he was raised by an alcoholic mom. And he's seen this stuff before. And he sees where it goes. And there's going to be an OD scare by Kathy's sister. And they're going to look at this and they're going to say, hey, wait a minute. You're pointing fingers at the Mad Men group and their hypocrisy and their alcoholism, but you're just as wasted. You know, I didn't find being raised by an alcoholic to be a terribly good thing. Why would I follow in that path? Now, it's a very rational thing. Many people, of course, do. But again, the movie just sets it up nicely. And of course, now back to the Chuck Smith side and the Lonnie Frisbee side. Oh, the hippies are taking over the house. And Chuck Smith is letting people in. And yeah, it's getting a little chaotic here. And now what used to be sort of 1960s respectability is, well, it's Christian-y. And now they have a Christian rock band. And now you have music as the Christian psychotechnology, that the music and the culture and the music in the church, and why does the devil have all the good music? And Chuck Smith, what's that YouTuber's, her father was not Chuck Smith, but Chuck Girard. And I remember my parents getting a Chuck Girard album, and again, I listened to that music when I was a kid, so I still listen to, still when I hear a Chuck Girard album, I think, yeah, that's very much this whole scene. And of course, this music will change music in church and bring about the big sound that you'll hear if you go up to Bethel. And of course, now you got the drums and the guitars and the mics and the praise band, and this is all coming, baby. This is all coming, but it's sort of in the midst. But now the church is full. You got people sitting in the aisles. You got people without shoes on, but you got the old people in there, and some of them are like, I'm out of here. I ain't doing any of this. And you got other people that are like, hey, what are you complaining about? The church is full. These people are getting baptized. Now, again, it's God's Forever Family is a good section. I mean, there had to be a lot of sorting through the drug stuff. And of course, with Lonnie Frisbee, the same-sex stuff, and it's a messy, messy business. And for as brief a story, you got to get it under 2 hours. The movie doesn't try to gloss over the messiness of it, but it's messier still than what's in the movie, of course. In the meantime, there's a lot of tension now, increasingly between Kathy and Greg, and that's being juxtaposed between Mom and Greg. So there's a lot going on there. And the movie's really well done. It's a good movie. And so now there's going to be a big showdown, and the pastor's not going to blink. And of course, it's going to become a successful ministry, and it's going to become a really successful ministry because the whole Calvary Chapel movement is going to grow out of this. And Lonnie Frisbee is also going to be, hook up with John Wimber and be at the heart of the Vineyard movement. So Lonnie Frisbee, for all of the complexity of him, had integral roles in both the founding of Calvary Chapel and the Vineyard movements. Now, Kathy's going to have enough of the drug scene very quickly, and she's now found the Jesus people, and she's going to bring Greg there, and she's going to get baptized, and Greg's going to get baptized. Now we go back to this scene that we sort of had at the beginning of the movie. Not exactly. And now they're going to have to deal with the fact that Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee have a falling out, and that's sort of set up. And again, it's a movie, so it's stylized, it's cleaned up, and sort of moved. But there's also, so of course, young Greg Lowry comes in, and he finally finds his family, but then suddenly, just like Dad and Mom couldn't stay together, Chuck and Lonnie Frisbee couldn't stay together. And that's going to be kind of a mess. And Lonnie Frisbee is going to be like super, popular, but also increasingly a little erratic and unstable. And eventually the order that Chuck Smith insists upon is going to be laid on the line. And so very much you see a working through of the chaos and order stuff. Greg Lowry wants to do the right thing and marry Kathy. Dad says no. There's going to be a breakup. Really, the second part of the movie is a maturing. Greg's going to have to come to terms with a lot of the stuff going on in his life, and he's going to have to grow up. And he's going to have to become more of a man. He's going to have a ministry failure, and then he's going to be given another chance. And so really the last third of the movie is sort of the maturing and the hero finding his footing. And, he's going to have a breakup with Kathy. Connie, Lonnie Frisbee's wife, is going to say, you'll always be family here. Now, Connie hasn't said real happy things about the movie. I'm not going to weigh in on any of that stuff. And so young Greg is going to, finally, Chuck is going to basically, he tried out things and it's some church in Riverside and it didn't work out well, but then that church went belly up. And now, of course, Chuck Smith is uber successful pastor. And so got a hold of the building and gives the keys to Greg. And in many ways, the whole church planting movement founded in this because, well, success in church planting wasn't determined by a theological education as much as someone getting the vibe and being able to get on with it. Again, a lot of the roots of this you can find in Larry Eskridge's book. You'd have people going to counterculture places and trying to preach, and very much quickly seeing how they had to adopt the clothing and adopt the language and adopt the mannerisms and adopt the culture. This is also, of course, this will also change Christian missiology. You have to indigenize, you have to acculturate. Of course, Fuller Seminary is going to be founded in this, and Fuller Seminary, their school of world missions, their theological school, and their psychological school. This will become the big box evangelical template. Then, of course, evangelicalism is a very broad category. People are always struggling to define it, but very much this is the remaking of the evangelical church. And so these people come to the beach and they want to be baptized. They weren't there on the right day, and of course, you don't need to be ordained to baptize anyone. I had a wonderful conversation with Father Eric over in Washington, D.C. about, well, you can't make chrism. I barely know what chrism is. And again, all this ideas, the church ideas of apostolic succession and hierarchy, well, that all goes out the window. These kids want to be baptized, and, Lonnie Frisbee was baptizing, and, now young Greg Lowry will baptize, and then after he baptizes those kids, in a sense in that baptism is reborn. He comes to the house soaking wet. He meets with the parents. Now he says, it's a very interesting move because in some ways it's a domestication of the counterculture. And one might suggest that is in effect what the Jesus Revolution was a domestication of the counterculture, where elements of the music are preserved, elements of all of these things are preserved. But again, the goal is marriage, monogamy, households. And so now after he has baptized these people, now he can come to the house and now he can propose marriage to Kathy, and he'll give this speech at the end where basically this is why there's tension in this movie as to whether this is a movie about coming to Jesus or this is a movie about the triumph of romantic love. And of course, if you're making a movie about the triumph of romantic love in American culture, that's a commercial winner. Now, of course, Christianity isn't exclusive to romantic love, but this is not Mrs. Davis, where you're going to have the nun married to Jesus. This is Protestant evangelicalism, and so that then becomes, in a sense, the climax of the movie, although they will have some, retrospectives on who these people were. And yeah, this is, if you live through some of this, that it's all going to look familiar. And Greg Lowry's going to become a successful evangelist, and et cetera, et cetera. So there it is. So the movie is a success, and it's a good movie, and it has all the feels, and the soundtrack is great, and this movie's going, a lot of people are going to, boomers are going to go to this movie, boomer Christians are going to go to this movie and say, yeah, a lot of them. But of course, in real life, it's way messier than that. And it's always messier than Hollywood. But still, a lot in this movie that even if you get to someone like Scott Adams, you have the question of, okay, how can transformation take place? How can I become the kind of person that can handle a marriage? Now, Scott Adams would basically say, well, maybe marriage isn't for everyone, and I can just deal with my relationships with people fairly transactionally. Okay. That's in some ways Greg Lowry's mom in the movie, though, too. And so the movie, even though the movie isn't necessarily terribly deep, the questions raised and discussed in the movie do go deeper than, let's say, the movie is able to address in it. And of course, churches do go deeper, and real Christians in real life have to go deeper and work on those questions that Scott Adams is raising. So that's probably good enough for now. Hopefully I won't have any copyright issues with this little video. But yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think.